Panem Hunger Games Chronicles. The 105th Hunger Games took place in the year 127 and were greatly anticipated by capital viewers. For the twist this year, siblings would be reaped together. In District 14, Dante and Gabriel Perez were reaped, but both died in the bloodbath. Bella and Castel Velasquez were also reaped, and as of now, they are currently in an alliance with Java from 3, who had just lost his brother Cord the previous day to Conifer and Laura from 7. In District 2, Junia and Julia Dalton were the girls who volunteered, although Junia was tragically killed during the bloodbath by Viscera and Barona from 10, leaving Julia devastated. However, Julia was helped by Spartacus Castro from 2, who along with his twin brother Lucius volunteered. The boys were capital favorites, being the nephew of Janus Castro. However, when they hunted Conifer, Laura, and Basil and Plum from 11 on the second day, they started a fight, but they were soon distracted by a cannon. Meanwhile, Junia and Laura had been getting annoyed with the horrific screech their axes were making. Laura then said that she did not wish to fight and lowered her axe slightly, whilst Julia kept hers in the air. However, Lucius suddenly yelled for help and Julia swore when she saw Conifer managing to fend off both Castro brothers, hence distracting her. Julia immediately spun back towards Laura, but it was too late and Laura had lunged towards her. The two girls fell to the ground, both trying to grab their axes. Laura grabbed her axe and Julia punched her, seizing the axe from her hands. However, Laura delivered a well-timed kick to Julia's stomach, causing her to gasp in pain, and she dropped the axe. Laura grinned and turned around, but then Conifer shouted out at Laura, despite being locked in combat with the Castro brothers. Laura spun around and snarled when she saw that Julia had slowly got to her feet and was holding her axe. Laura scoffed in contempt and acknowledged Julia with a condescending sneer before muttering, "So you'd kill me from behind?" and then charging at Julia. She pushed Julia to the ground before saying, "You're a coward, Dalton scum." Julia got to her feet once more, and this angered Laura, and she slammed the axe into Julia's stomach. Julia gasped in pain, but Laura quickly grabbed her and held her above her head. Conifer saw this and told Laura not to be sadistic, but Laura said District 2 would have done this to them, before throwing her arm back and launching Julia's convulsing body over the balcony, causing her to snap her neck on the ground, and her cannon sounded. Lucius and Spartacus roared in anger as Julia's body hit the ground and her cannon sounded. A moan was heard from Rubius as Icarus groaned in Snow Square, before turning to Asha Seatle and smiling grimly at her, saying she had taught her tributes well. Meanwhile, Casco Astriana and Delphine Dubois were shouting for their mentees to kill each other, with Blade fighting Plum and Landon dueling Basil. Lucius snarled at Conifer, but just then Laura jumped onto him with her axe before slamming it down onto his left arm. Lucius screamed in pain as Laura tried to retrieve the axe from Lucius's arm, but it was too deep for her to get it out. Lucius shouted for Spartacus, who punched Conifer unconscious, before grabbing Lucius and kicking Laura unconscious as well. Spartacus grabbed Julia's axe as the Deathclaw came down from the ceiling to collect her body, while shouting at Blade and Landon to abandon the 11s and run, to which they agreed. Lucius groaned in pain as he ran, but within a few minutes all 4 boys had returned to the main building. Rhaegal, Payrite, and the others immediately asked what had happened, but Lucius replied that Laura had killed Julia. Lucius then collapsed from the pain in his arm and he yanked the axe out, causing him to moan. Payrite shouted that he was good at medical skills and he placed Lucius on the ground before cleaning out his wound and applying a bandage. The couriers decided that they would take a break and not do anything important for the rest of the day. They ate some more soup around 3 hours before midnight, congratulating the culinary talent of Lucius and Spartacus, before Horn of Plenty played later at midnight, and the portraits of Julia from 2, Nicholas from 5, and Otto and Otta from 6 were shown, meaning that another 4 tributes had fallen and 26 now remain. Spartacus could be seen clenching his fists as Julia's portrait was shown, whilst Lucius got over the pain in his arm. During this time, the newly formed alliance of Bella, Castel, and Java remained where they were, with Castel gasping and jumping up when the cannon of Julia sounded. Java appeared slightly wary about the tributes from 14, admitting that he missed Cord a lot. Bella once again told him that Cord would have wanted to win, and Java nodded, but then suddenly heard something approaching. Java told Bella and Castell to hide themselves in the vault at the back of the room where they were hiding in. Bella told Java that she was older and that she could protect Java and Castell, but Java replied that he had an extremely long sword. Bella replied with a scoff, but then told Castell to hide in the vault. As he did so, Bella thanked Java for his help before she too entered the vault. Within seconds, several snakes had entered the room and Java yelped, but Bella and Castell heard him decapitating all of them with his sword. Castell and Bella then climbed out of the vault, thanking Java for having slayed all of the snakes. He smiled, saying it was nothing, before Castellan told Bella that he was extremely hungry. Bella winced, saying that she had only gotten a bottle of water from the bloodbath. Castell told her it is okay, before asking Java if he had any food. Java replied that he had not stolen any food during the bloodbath either, but that he had learned during training that snakes could be eaten as long as they were decapitated. To prove that he was not trying to poison his allies, Java ate one of the snakes, before saying, "Delicious." Bella and Castell soon followed, and after the portraits of the fallen were shown, Bella cheered when she saw that Julia was dead. Java replied that he planned to kill the couriers tomorrow before going to bed. Castell then went to bed, causing Bella to keep first watch. She lay awake before muttering, "Que todos sobrevivan," under her breath repeatedly, before hugging Castell and Java. To the surprise of many tributes, they were awoken by the sound of a large gong sounding, signaling the beginning of day 3. Lucius and Spartacus awoke the rest of their allies and they spoke about Conifer and Laura, but a pair of cannons suddenly went off, and the group spun around to see the Deathclaw retrieving the bodies of Panla and Huska from 9, after the girls had tried to sneak up on the couriers but then fell into one of Lucius's traps. As their bodies were recovered, Spartacus stated that only 24 tributes remained, but just then the cannon of Nicola and Basil sounded, after they had both killed each other during an encounter. Lucius grinned, saying only 22 now remained, but as they prepared to eat breakfast, another 2 cannons sounded, making Spartacus grin. Meanwhile, Bella and Java awoke Castell, who was clearly very tired. A sponsor gift floated down to Java, revealing a small dagger. For a few minutes, Bella and Java argued over who deserved the knife, with Java shouting that it was his gift and Bella protesting that he already had a sword. However, Castell immediately marched forwards and grabbed the knife from the pair, before saying that they should not argue. However, just then a tile of concrete hit him in the leg. Castell yelped in pain and dropped to the ground whilst Java handed Bella the knife. He readied his sword in horror as 17-year-old Vazel and 16-year-old Majara from 4 suddenly ran into the room from behind the door where they had been hiding. Vazel and Majara had both received tridents as sponsor gifts, and Vazel quickly threw hers at Castell, although Java pushed him out of the way, leading to the trident landing in his chest. As Bella screamed, she grabbed Castell and Java shouted that he was fine, as the trident had only hit some skin. However, Java was still bleeding, but he slowly got to his feet, lunging towards Vazel and crashing into her, causing both of them to fall to the ground. He shouted at Bella to take on Majara with the knife, and Bella immediately began dueling with Majara. However, Majara's trident was much bigger and longer than Bella's knife, and within seconds, Majara had impaled Bella's hand with the knife. Bella howled in pain and desperately tried to remove the trident from her hand, whilst Java slammed his sword into the side of Vazel's head. She yelped in pain and turned to Bella, but just as she was about to attack her, Castell lunged towards Bella's knife, which had been dropped. Majara didn't notice this, and as Vazel neared Bella, Castell shrieked and threw the knife at Majara. It hit her in the head and her cannon immediately sounded, where Java slammed his sword into Vazel's ankle, causing blood to fall onto the floor. Bella seized this opportunity and stabbed her knife down into Vazel's neck repeatedly, sounding her cannon a few seconds later. As the Deathclaw retrieved the bodies of the 2 sisters from 4, Bella began shaking, saying she had killed 2 siblings. However, Castell had dropped to the ground, whimpering. Java turned to Bella and Castell and told them that they had just been trying to protect themselves from the sisters. Bella then asked Java what his plans to kill the couriers were, and he grinned, before jerking his head towards the center of the arena. Java explained that, like in previous years, the couriers were taking over the cornucopia. He then stated that the couriers could get extremely cocky in some games, which made Bella start another rant about how much she hated Spartacus. Java frowned and told her that they would be able to kill the couriers if they worked together, making Bella grin. Bella cracked her knuckles and tossed her blonde hair over her shoulder before asking Castell to follow Java along with her. They ran through the many rooms of the arena and occasionally glanced over their shoulder to make sure that no one was following them. They continued running, but Java nearly fell into a spike pit, which made him mouth at Bella and Castell to walk carefully. They finally made it to one of the doors leading to the main hall, and Castell slowly opened it to see the careers eating some breakfast. However, there seemed to be more tension between the group as Marvell mocked the Castro brothers due to Junia and Julia having fallen. Marvell asked Lucius and Spartacus what they thought about the deaths of Junia and Julia, and they glanced at each other before shrugging and replying that some tributes from influential families became too cocky, and that as Junia and Julia's family had produced 3 victors, it was no wonder that they were unprepared. Lucius then muttered that their uncle Janus had not been arrogant, while Spartacus shouted that just because Janus had enjoyed himself during the 96 Hunger Games, he did not deserve to die. Lucius and Spartacus spent a few more minutes discussing their uncle and stating that Atomica Perez was a psychopathic lunatic. Sapphire scoffed, stating that in District 1, teenagers at the training academy referred to Janus as the blockhead. Lucius spun around and snarled before telling Sapphire not to say that ever again. Lucius then asked if anyone knew where Atomica Perez was, as she had not been mentioned ever since the 100 Hunger Games. They exchanged theories about what had happened to Atomica, whilst there has been no mention of her name since 122. Java and the 14s watched with impatient looks on their faces as the careers and joined themselves, with Blade going into detail about how he killed animals back in District 10 and Landon discussing his work at the training academy in 10. Finally, the careers decided that they wanted to explore the arena a little and divided themselves into groups of 2. Marvell and Siren were one group, Sapphire and Ford were another, Rachel and Landon were the next pair, and Playwright and Lucius did not appear to enjoy having to walk together, whilst Blade happily accepted Spartacus as his partner. Java and the 14s decided to follow Marvell and Siren, as they were the least strongest of the group. Castell suggested that they instead follow Sapphire and Fjord, but just as Sapphire flexed her arms in order to impress Fjord, revealing her muscles, which made Castell wince, and he instead pointed towards Marvell and Siren. Marvell and Siren walked in the direction Bella, Java, and Castell had just come from, which made Castell gasp, although Bella pulled him back. They slowly followed Marvell and Siren, who appeared to be arguing. The cameras picked up that Marvell was stating that Siren was not a real career, but he retorted that he trained at a training academy and had volunteered for the games alongside 4, which made Marvell smirk. As they continued walking, Java and the 14s discreetly followed them, desperately trying not to make a sound. Java grinned when he saw that Marvell and Siren were making their way towards the same room that the trio had been hiding in. Java whispered that there was a vault in that room, which made Bella grin, although Castell asked him what this meant. Marvell and Siren entered the room and Java ran to the door of the room, before seeing that the vault was in the room. However, as Marvell and Siren observed the vault and opened it, Java sprinted behind Siren and threw his sword at Siren's head. Siren roared in pain and collapsed to his knees as blood dripped down his neck. Marvell jolted around to see that Siren was lying on the ground in pain and Java was right behind her. Marvell barely had time to scream before Java lunged towards her, causing her to step backwards. She fell into the vault and yelped, but Java shut the door to the vault and locked it, causing Marvell to shriek even louder. Java apologized to the groaning Siren and removed the sword from his head, sounding his cannon, whilst Marvell shouted to be let out. Java then glanced at his allies, before sarcastically bowing. He then told Bella and Castell to follow him, as the careers would soon find Marvell. Bella congratulated Java for having killed Siren, but Java replied that he did not feel very happy. Bella told him that he could win, but Java told her that there was no point in winning as he had already lost his older brother. Bella sighed before assuring Java that his parents would have wanted both of them to win, but that it was impossible in this Tierra de Gilipolases, which made Rubius scoff as the translation of this phrase was handed to him by Priscilla. Java and the 14s then ran further, entering a room with a blackboard and rows of chairs, with Priscilla stating that Sunday school must have been taught in this room. After 2 hours, the careers met up inside the main room. Lucius and Playwright were the first to arrive, and they waited as Sapphire and Ford, then Landon and Regal, and finally Spartacus and Blade entered. They discussed where Marvell and Siren could be, while Sapphire and Ford were clearly worried about their siblings. Lucius decided to go try and find him, to which Spartacus immediately agreed. Sapphire and Ford appeared even more nervous, and Playwright did not help diffuse the tension as he stated that the previous cannon had either belonged to Marvell or Siren. Ford glared at him, but then continued running. Lucius snarled at Playwright before telling Sapphire and Ford that Marvell and Siren were definitely alive, as they were careers. Even Regal appeared to be annoyed by Playwright's comment, but they soon reached a room where Siren had been killed. Ford knelt to the ground where he saw the blood that had poured down Siren's neck. Ford then reached for a tiny piece of string that had come off of Siren's shirt. Ford whimpered as he muttered that the string was blue and might have belonged to Siren, but just as Marvell banged on the door of the vault and asked to be let out. Sapphire immediately opened the door and embraced Marvell, who immediately told the others that Tiny Tree had killed Siren and had locked her in the vault. Lucius and Spartacus grinned at each other before removing their axes from their belt and throwing them at Marvell's chest, causing her to crumble to the ground. Marvell's cannon sounded and Sapphire spun around and shouted obscenities at Lucius and Spartacus, but she was quickly distracted by the cannon of Cinda from 12 after she had been hunted down and killed by Bushell from 9, and they had an epic fight due to Bushell having almost killed Cinda's brother after Dark had killed his brother, Ceres. Lucius and Spartacus calmly replied that if Marvell could get herself locked in a vault, she was not a proper career tribute and did not have the necessary skills. Rubius laughed at the indifference in Spartacus's voice, but Sapphire snarled and through her tears told Lucius and Spartacus that they were not supposed to make a decision about who was worthy and who was not. In an unforeseen and unexpected manner, Sapphire lunged towards Lucius, knocking him off his feet. He banged his head against the floor and gasped in pain as Sapphire twisted his genitals, making him scream. Spartacus punched Sapphire in the head and she fell on top of Lucius. Spartacus then snapped Sapphire's neck, and as her cannon sounded, all hell broke loose. Ford suddenly snarled at Lucius and Spartacus, asking if they would have killed Siren had he been locked in the vault. Blade and Landon too joined this fight, asking if anyone who got trapped by a tree deserved death. Landon then laughed, saying that although Janus had been killed by a tree, the brothers spoke about him in glowing terms. But whilst Marvell had been caught by surprise and trapped in a vault, she had been killed. Regal and Playwright protested that Lucius and Spartacus were from District 2 and that the training academies were taught differently in District 2 than in District 1 and District 4. But Ford then rounded on the Mace brothers, asking them if they were really siding with the blockheads' nephews. This caused Lucius to roar in anger as Spartacus lunged towards Ford and knocked him to the ground before stabbing him in the neck with his sword. Ford grinned slightly, knowing that he was dying, and he gulped with difficulty before spitting out blood in Spartacus's face, making him blink as Ford's cannon sounded. Spartacus grabbed Ford's sword and slammed it into his belt before grabbing Siren's sword as well. Spartacus was now armed with 3 swords, but then gasped when he saw that Blade was trying to force his spear into Lucius's throat. Lucius was resisting with all the strength in his arms, and Rubius pointed out that Lucius was not very muscular, but Priscilla retorted that he at least had a solid build. However, this did not appear to matter as Blade had plenty of training back in District 10 and worked in a slaughterhouse, giving him about as much strength as Lucius. The boys fought over the spear until Lucius finally managed to push Blade away, causing him to collide with Landon. The boys from District 10 both fell to the ground and shouted obscenities as Regal stood over them with his axe. Blade shouted at Regal to stop and Regal grinned, before asking why he should do so. In response to this question, Blade pointed at Spartacus, who had just lunged towards Playwright with his sword. Regal shouted for Playwright and pounced towards Spartacus, causing him to fall to the ground. Lucius yelled out and charged at Regal as Landon got to his feet, and he stabbed his spear into Blade's chest, causing him to gasp. Blade glared at Landon and stopped moving, although it was noted by Rubius that Blade had received body armor the day before as a sponsor gift. Blade laughed and got to his feet, grinning at Landon, who smirked back at him. Regal scowled, and as he got to his feet, however, Blade lunged towards him and they fell to the ground. Blade desperately tried to stab Regal with his spear, but Playwright tackled him to the ground. Blade swore as Landon took on Regal, and Lucius nodded at Spartacus before they turned and ran. The brothers ran away from the vault room and whispered to each other urgently before making their way towards the altar room. Conifer and Laura had left this room a few hours prior, and so Lucius and Spartacus set up camp here. Meanwhile, two cannons sounded as Rhaegal and Paywright finally managed to overpower Blade and Landon after a long and exhausting fight. Lucius turned to Spartacus and asked his twin brother if they had been wrong to turn on their allies. But Spartacus told him that their uncle's district partner Vesma had turned on him, and that it was necessary to turn on their allies first. Meanwhile, as soon as Java heard numerous cannons going off, he turned to Bella and Castal and told them that the couriers had turned on each other. They spent the rest of the evening in the Sunday school classroom, and Bella agreed to take first watch again. It was several hours later that the portraits of Marvel and Sapphire from 1, Siren, Ford, Vizel and Majara from 4, Nicola from 5, Panla and Huska from 9, Blade and Landon from 10, Basil from 11, and Cinda from 12 were shown, meaning that 13 tributes had fallen today, and that 13 tributes remained. These 13 were Rhaegal and Paywright Mace from 1, Lucius and Spartacus Castro from 2, Java Starkwood from 3, Nina Pompeo from 5, Conifer and Laura Branks from 7, Tartan Davis from 8, Bushel Gardiner from 9, Plum Sorrell from 11, and Bella and Castel Velasquez from 14. A gong sounded once more, waking Java up on the morning of day 4. He had watched Horn of Plenty the previous night whilst he was supposed to be asleep, and he appeared cheerful that the girls from 1, the boys from 4, and the boys from 10 were dead. Java then glanced at Bella and Castal, before whispering under his breath as he stared at them. He simply muttered that there were only 10 outer tributes left, and he took a deep breath before reaching for his sword. Java stared up at Bella and Castal and slowly approached them with his sword, before raising them above Castal's head. However, Castal woke up and Java immediately placed his sword into his belt, before asking Castal why he was already awake. Castal shrugged, stating that he felt restless. Java nodded in realization and asked Castal if he thought he could win. Castal grinned and replied that as most of their strongest opponents were dead, he felt much more confident. However, Java told him that only one could win these games, which made Castal glare at him. Java replied that he was just telling the truth and told Castal that he could win, just not with Bella. Castal glanced at Java, who simply smiled back in a grim manner. Castal replied that it made no sense that the capital would reap 2 to 4 tributes of one district if only one could make it victorious, stating that it would make more sense if 2 tributes could win if they were from the same district. Java told Castal that the last time this had been allowed, it had led to disaster. Castal turned away for a second and asked Java what he meant by disaster. But Java replied that he would meet with an unfortunate accident if he gave Castal any more information. Java then told Castal that, as he had said before, only one could win. And as Castal replied that he knew this, Java expressed his regrets, before lunging towards Castal with his sword. Castal screamed as Java placed a hand over his mouth and told him to stop resisting. Java tried to force his rather sharp sword into Castal's throat. With the younger boy shaking in fear as he pushed away the sword with his hands, causing drops of blood to begin dripping from his hands. Bella finally woke up and shouted as she saw Java trying to force the sword through her younger brother's throat. Castal shouted obscenities in Spanish at Java, who smirked, saying he did not know what these words meant, but that he would try to learn after he won. Bella punched Java in the head and he fell to the side with a yelp of pain. Bella asked Java what he was doing and he replied that his older brother would have wanted him to win. Bella took a deep breath before telling Java that she was sorry. Java grinned at her and told her that she could kill him if she wanted, as he would join his older brother in something called the afterlife. Bella glanced at Java and told him she would not kill him, which made him give a suppressed laugh. As Bella stared at him, Java grabbed his sword and slit his own throat. Bella and Castal both shrieked as Java smiled sadly at them and pitched forwards onto the ground, beginning to shake. Despite his throat having been slit, Java managed to whisper the name of his dead older brother Cord, and his cannon sounded a little while later. This cannon did not seem to affect any tributes, but Lucius had already awoke and stretched as the cannon sounded. Spartacus himself awoke and acknowledged Lucius, before talking about how peaceful it was that the two of them were no longer with their allies. Spartacus asked Lucius if he could kill Rhaegal, and Lucius replied that this was fine, as long as he could kill Paywright. Lucius muttered, 12 remaining, huh? And Spartacus laughed, saying that this was in fact true. The boys were gifted with a huge basket of bread, jam, and along with metal bottles of water and ham. Lucius and Spartacus grinned in delight at their picnic and began devouring the ham whilst drinking the water. Spartacus said even the water was tasty, and Lucius shook his head and smiled at his twin brother. Lucius and Spartacus then decided to go to the main room of the arena in order to try to find any other tributes. But as they opened one of the doors, they noticed the Mace Brothers of District 1 sitting on the statue where the supplies were. The hovercraft soon retrieved Java's body and Castell began whimpering once more, clearly upset that Java had killed himself. Bella tried to calm Castell down, but he replied that Java should not have killed himself. Bella hugged Castell and agreed with him, saying that Java's brother's death was now pointless, as Java would not be able to win. The siblings then moved to the front of the room and rested for a few minutes, before deciding to return to the center of the arena just as Game Maker Griffin began an announcement. It was noticed that Lucius paid the most attention to Griffin's announcement, even telling Spartacus that he found her voice dreamy. Spartacus scoffed in amusement as Griffin told the remaining 12 tributes that a feast would take place in the cornucopia in 30 minutes and they would get something they wanted but did not necessarily need, before ending the announcement. Although Nina from 5 and Plum from 11 appeared to not wish to attend the feast, they appeared to have second thoughts and Plum moved from the altar room towards the central room, narrowly avoiding Conifer and Laura from 7, whilst Nina muttered the name of her younger brother, Limit, who had died at the hands of Spartacus during the bloodbath on the first day. Nina walked from the sacristy, what had once been the preparation room, and ran through the corridors to make her way to the main room. Lucius and Spartacus grinned at each other, with Spartacus muttering, "Finally," and Lucius laughing and saying, "About time." They then packed up their food and placed it in a large leather bag that sponsors had gifted them, before running towards the central room. They spent the next 30 minutes navigating the corridors, whilst Bella and Castell were slightly closer to the central room and made it outside one of the 8 doors in 23 minutes. Meanwhile, Regal and Paywright were enjoying themselves as they were already near the statue and the feast platform swiftly rose up. A few seconds passed before the platforms fully rose into the statue, and Laura and Conifer sprinted inwards to grab the feast bags for District 7. However, Paywright charged in front of Laura, blocking her way, causing her to yelp. Conifer ignored this and ran towards the statue, but just as Bella and Castell ran inwards, and Bella took a deep breath before launching her knife towards Conifer, which hit him in the arm. As for Lucius and Spartacus, they already knew that Regal and Paywright were controlling the statue, and so they took careful precautions, but then grinned as they noticed Conifer and Laura. Spartacus's grin turned into a snarl as he stared at Laura, before telling Lucius he was going to avenge Julia by killing Laura. Lucius nodded in acceptance, before hugging Spartacus and telling him to be careful. Just as Conifer made his way towards the feast bag for District 7, Paywright punched him in the face and pushed him to the ground. Paywright slashed his axe at Conifer, who narrowly dodged his swipes, despite being pinned to the ground. Conifer then punched Paywright in the nose, causing him to yelp in pain as blood began dripping from his left nostril. Bella ran towards Conifer and retrieved her knife from his arm, before noticing Plum chasing Castell, who was screaming in fright. Bella cursed under her breath in Cuban, before zigzagging past Laura, who was on the ground in pain as Spartacus continually slashed her with his sword. Bella snarled and charged towards Plum, calling her a pequeña perra and punching her in the face, shouting at her to get off of Castell. Plum spun around and grinned, before licking her lips and abandoning Castell, instead turning towards Bella. As she tackled Bella to the ground, Bella stabbed her in the heart, causing her to fall into the ground. Bella then stabbed her in the head and asked Castell if he was okay, but then looked up to see that Castell had tried to grab the feast bag for District 14 and had just encountered Regal. Plum's cannon sounded and a fight broke out in Snow Square between supporters of the Mace brothers and supporters of the Velasquez siblings as Regal pinned Castell to the statue and tried to stab him with his axe. Bella swore in a panic and noticed that Paywright, who had recently been gifted with a crossbow, had dropped it, and so she picked it up and loaded it with arrows. Regal was now gaining the upper hand in his fight with Castell, but as he was about to kill Castell with his axe, Bella fired an arrow at his back. Regal winced in pain, but Bella fired many more arrows at him. Paywright and Conifer were now dueling with their axes, and Paywright tried to grab his crossbow, which had just been stolen by Bella. Paywright swore when he saw that his crossbow was gone, but he headbutted Conifer, causing him to fall to the ground once more. Paywright slammed his axe into Conifer's head, sounding his cannon just as Spartacus snapped Laura's neck, sounding her cannon. Paywright then snarled at Conifer's body, muttering that he was extremely hard work. He then stretched and asked Regal who he wanted to kill next, but after hearing no response, he spun around to see Bella firing arrows at Regal. Playwright gasped and screamed for Regal as his older brother jolted around, fell on the statue, and collapsed to his knees, pitching forwards as his cannon sounded, with 8 arrows in his back. Playwright cried out, and it was noticed that several tears fell from his eyes. He shouted obscenities at Bella, but just as he ran towards her, he was knocked to the ground. He noticed Tartan from 8, who had just pounced upon Spartacus. As soon as Tartan saw Spartacus snapping Laura's neck, he snarled and muttered Cotty's name, before shouting out Spartacus's name. Spartacus jolted around and scoffed in amusement, but just then Tartan extended his middle finger at Spartacus and shouted, "You censored bastard!" at the top of his lungs, before running straight past Playwright, knocking him to the ground, and punching Spartacus in the face. Spartacus grunted in pain and tried to push Tartan away, but Tartan shouted that his sister was dead because of Spartacus. Lucius had just grabbed District 2's feast bags and heard Spartacus's cry for help as he was repeatedly punched, kicked, bitten, stomped upon, headbutted, kneed, and elbowed by a seething, fuming, and raging Tartan. Lucius swore and shouted Spartacus's name as he ran towards his twin brother, who was still being assaulted by a vengeful Tartan, who continually shouted that Spartacus had killed his little sister. Spartacus laughed and said, "That was a fun kill," which made Tartan punch him even more. As Tartan was beginning to throttle a bleeding Spartacus, Lucius jumped on his back and told him to leave Spartacus alone. Tartan spun around and cursed as he saw Lucius glaring at him, but then suddenly shouted in pain as he looked down to see Spartacus's sword protruding from his stomach. Tartan gagged and coughed blood as Lucius gave him a sympathetic smile. Tartan placed a hand to his wound and glared at Spartacus, who was snarling and laughing at the same time. Spartacus told Tartan how happy he felt to have killed 2 siblings, and in the last moment of his life, Tartan spat out as much blood as he could into Spartacus's face, making him flinch. He then collapsed to his knees and his cannon sounded, making Lucius help Spartacus up. The brothers then sprinted away, but Playwright lunged towards Bella with his axe and he punched her in the back of the head with such force that she fell to the ground. Bella shouted at Castell to run and he did so, but Bella did not see which direction he had run in. She kicked Playwright in the groin, causing him to yell in pain, and as he dropped to the ground, Bella grabbed a feast bag for District 14, before turning and running in the opposite direction that Castell had run in. Nina from 5 and Bushell from 9 finally entered the cornucopia as they saw Playwright on the ground, but only Nina managed to grab her bag, as Bushell had to run when Playwright got to his feet. Lucius and Spartacus immediately sprinted towards the altar room, and Lucius's black curls bobbed slightly as he ran. Lucius had to repeatedly remove them from his eyes, and his good looks became more visible. The 2 of them soon made it to the altar room, and they sat down and breathed out in exhaustion, before Lucius opened their feast bags, revealing 2 shields, which made Spartacus gasp in admiration. Lucius spoke about how the shield went with a spear, and Spartacus grinned in amusement. As for Castell, he sprinted in a central north direction after leaving the statue, with no purpose. He seemed scared and whimpered, asking for Bella, although she had run in a central south direction towards the Sunday school classroom. Castell appeared to give up hope and he sank to the wall, before trying to sit on the ground, but he ended up sitting on Nina, who was lying down, making her shout. Nina shouted out and asked Castell what he was trying to do by sitting on her. As Castell gasped in fright, Nina slapped him on his left cheek, making him wince. Castell staggered backwards and Nina's face softened before saying, "You're the Latino, aren't you?" Castell told her that he was from District 14, and Nina smiled before asking him where Bella was. Castell tearfully responded that he had no idea where Bella was, as she had been targeted by Playwright during the feast. Nina scoffed in amusement, before saying that in fairness, Bella had killed Playwright's older brother. Nina asked Castell if he wanted her help in finding Bella, and Castell smiled. Castell asked Nina what she wanted in return, but she replied that she did not want anything. Nina then turned to the nearest camera and without Castell noticing, she said to her mentor, Eddie, that if she found Bella, Castell would trust her and she could kill 2 birds with 1 stone, amusing viewers in Snow Square and Eddie himself. They exited the corridor, but as they made their way back towards the main room, the floor under them suddenly began falling. Nina pushed Castell to the other end of the corridor and swore she nearly fell. However, she used a metal claw she had been gifted during the feast and had placed across her hands, and she therefore used them to climb up the floor and avoided falling into the darkness. Castell asked Nina if she was okay and he smiled at her before she grinned at him. As he turned around, Nina cracked her knuckles and after a few minutes they reached the main room of the temple. They peeked through the doors and saw that Playwright was sleeping. Nina asked Castell if he had seen Bella running, but he replied that he had not. Nina replied that she had seen Bella fleeing but had not seen her direction, and stating that the only door leading out of the main room that was still open was the one leading south. They quickly realized that Bella must have exited through this door, and Nina remembered that Rochelle had run in a northwestern direction, making Castell smile in happiness. They ran through this door and Castell thanked Nina, which made her grin back at him. However, they failed to realize that Playwright had just woken up and was slowly following them. Nina asked Castell if he and Bella had been in a room in this direction, which made Castell nod. Nina asked him if he would recognize this room, and Castell shrugged before saying that he might be able to do so. After about 20 minutes, they found his Sunday school classroom, and Castell stated that he and Bella had hidden here. Nina opened the door and called out Bella's name, making her jolt around. She grinned when she saw Castell, saying that they had been given lechon asado during the feast, making Castell smile. Nina could be seen rolling her eyes as she glanced at the siblings embracing, and Bella thanked Nina for bringing Castell for her. However, they did not notice Nina slowly reaching for a sharp fencing sword. Bella turned to Nina and asked if she wanted to start an alliance with them, but suddenly noticed Nina's sword. Nina then lunged towards Castell and held the sword to his throat, but was asking in mock Spanish if he was really so estupido. She then spoke in a baby voice and told Castell that she was going to kill him and Bella, but just as she was about to slit his throat, a cannon sounded, and Castell turned to see an arrow at the side of Idida's neck, which had instantly killed her. Nina's body collapsed to the ground and Bella asked Castell if he was okay, but just then Playwright fired an arrow at Bella's arm, causing her to cry out in pain. Playwright prepared to fire another arrow, but just then Bushell, who had been following him, punched him. Playwright began chasing Bushell, catching up with him after about 10 minutes. They had an ambitious duel, but Playwright distracted Bushell by mocking Ceres' death before stabbing Bushell in the neck with his dagger, sounding his cannon minutes after Nina's dead. Lucius and Spartacus heard the cannons and Spartacus grinned in delight, stating that only 5 tributes, including the 2 of them, remained. Lucius told Spartacus that they would make their father, Grandpa Castro, their uncle Janus, as well as their entire extended family proud. Playwright returned to the statue and rested, whispering Regal's name and clenching his fists, saying he would kill the Latinos as revenge for what Bella had done to Regal. Meanwhile, Bella and Castell both fell asleep in the chairs of the classroom after eating some of the lechon asado, which turned out to be roast pork. Whilst Lucius took first watch as Spartacus slept, ruffling his equally black curls. At midnight, Horn of Plenty played, and the portraits of Regal from 1, Java from 3, Nina from 5, Conifer and Laura from 7, Tartan from 8, Bushell from 9, and Plum from 11 were shown, leaving only 5 tributes out of the remaining original 52. Capital viewers cheered as the portraits of the remaining 5 tributes were shown. Those of Playwright Mace from 1, Lucius and Spartacus Castro from 2, and Bella and Castell Velasquez from 14. It was noticed that Playwright was wide awake during the night, sobbing when Regal's Playwright was shown in the sky as Heart of Plenty played. He slowly began whimpering that he could win these games and make Regal proud, before sleeping again, whilst Bella awoke during the night and kept an eye on Castell in order to make sure that he was safe. Meanwhile, Lucius and Spartacus took turns keeping watch, and both of them appeared nervous as they realized that they would need to face their opponents tomorrow. When the gong of the 5th day sounded, Priscilla spoke about how nice the victor's crown would look on the curly black hair of both Lucius and Spartacus, before admitting that it would also contrast with Bella's beautiful olive skin. Lucius and Spartacus awoke to the sound of a sponsor gift, as did Bella and Castell. Bella quickly grabbed the gift and opened it, to reveal a set of 3 daggers. Bella grinned and placed 2 of the daggers in her belt, before giving the other one to Castell, who smiled at her and took the dagger. Meanwhile, Lucius and Spartacus opened their gift to reveal 2 pairs of goggles. Lucius asked Spartacus what he thought these goggles were for, but he replied that they would need to use them if a blackout occurred, like it had in previous games. Lucius scoffed in amusement and told Spartacus that these were not night vision goggles, and so this was not their cause. Spartacus then glanced up and, seeing some sand on the ceiling, claimed that if the sand fell from the ceiling and created a sandstorm, they could use the goggles to navigate through the sand. The brothers argued about what they should do with these goggles and what they were useful for, but soon stopped shouting at each other, with Lucius reminding Spartacus that they still did not won the games and needed to work together if they wanted to win. Spartacus rolled his eyes from behind Lucius and slowly whispered if he wanted to win, making Rubius comment that Spartacus knew that only one could win, making Priscilla squeal in excitement. Gamemaker Griffin appeared to be bored of Paywright remaining in the central room, and so she told her fellow gamemakers that she would try to force Paywright out of that room in order for him to face the other tribute. As Paywright slept on the statue of the woman on top of it suddenly fell down, immediately waking him up. Paywright rolled to the side and swore in shock as the statue came crashing to the ground, with a piece of marble hitting him in his left hand, making him yell out. As Paywright slowly got to his feet, 2 of the flame sticks suddenly dropped to the ground, as well as many others, causing a fire to begin. Paywright once again swore and darted around, trying to avoid the fire. He grabbed 2 of the flame sticks and continued shouting as he tried to exit through one of the doors, but then noticed that it was locked from the outside. Paywright shouted as many obscenities as he knew before running to the door directly opposite the door he had just tried to escape. He shouted when he saw that this one would not open, and he kicked it with his foot, causing him to yelp. He glanced around and desperately tried to think about what he should do, but then glanced down at the fire sticks. Paywright took a deep breath, whispering Gragel's name, and then he took a step forward, before throwing one of the torches at the door. There was a slight fizz as a hole slowly began burning in the door, and Paywright gasped in relief, before kicking through the hole, creating an even larger hole. He then climbed out of this hole and wasted no time in running, putting on the body armor he had received during the feast as he ran. Paywright only appeared to be looking for his opponents, as well as trying to escape the central room, correctly guessing that if he returned it would only cause more trouble for him. Paywright then ran in the central north direction to the central room, and after several minutes of running, he entered the Sunday school classroom, which had a wide open door. Paywright gnashed his teeth as soon as he saw Bella, the killer of his brother. Rubius and Priscilla both noted that Bella and Castell did not appear to notice Paywright's close proximity to them. Paywright muttered that he was going to make both of the District 14 siblings suffer, and this amused the audience in Stowe Square. Paywright then grabbed his remaining torch and threw it as hard as he could out the door, causing a large crash. Bella told Castell she would investigate what had caused the crash, telling him to stay where he was. As soon as Bella left the room, Paywright left the table he was hiding under and walked up behind Castell, who was smiling and saying he could win these games. Paywright held one of his 2 daggers in his right hand, and as he neared Castell, he swung his left hand over Castell's mouth, and as he turned around, Paywright snarled at him. Castell let out a muffled scream from underneath Paywright's hand, and Paywright told him to say no more, or he would kill him in a more painful way than he had planned. Priscilla squealed in excitement and asked Rubius what he thought Paywright was going to do to Castell. Just as Paywright was about to stab Castell, Castell elbowed him in the face, causing him to flinch. Still keeping one hand over Castell's mouth, Paywright tossed some of his red coals out of his eyes, making Priscilla gasp in delight. Paywright then snarled at Castell, telling him that this was revenge for what Bella had done to Rachel, before muttering that he would show her how it felt to lose a brother. But just then he heard Bella slowly making her way back from her investigation. Paywright grinned, before stabbing his dagger into Castell's throat, severing his vocal cords. Castell began shaking, and Paywright placed his body behind one of the desks. Seconds later, Paywright heard Bella re-entering the room and he swore in a panic, realizing that he had not hidden himself very well. He slowly crawled to the back of the room, trying not to alert Bella's attention as she entered the room and called Castell's name. Bella grinned in glee as Bella repeatedly called Castell's name, asking him where he was and why he was hiding. Bella's tone gradually became more nervous as she continually called for Castell. She then suddenly heard a cannon and jumped in shock, before running through the room and checking behind the desks to see where Castell was hiding. Paywright held his breath as Bella finally found Castell's body, and she screamed as she saw his bloodied neck. Bella shouted Castell's name and placed a hand on his neck, but cried when she felt no pulse. Bella screamed once more, and through her tears, she told Castell she was sorry for not being able to save him. But Paywright smirked as Bella began sobbing and muttered, "Now she knows." He then slowly held both of his daggers in his hand, but as he was about to throw one at a crying Bella, another cannon sounded, making him jolt around. Meanwhile, Lucius and Spartacus decided that they would make their way back to the central room in order to find other tributes. It was noted by Rubius that Spartacus seemed rather nervous and could be seen sweating, although he did not seem to care very much. Lucius grinned at Spartacus, saying that there were only 5 tributes left, but just as then Castal's cannon sounded, making Spartacus smirk. As Lucius turned away from Spartacus, Spartacus said, 4 left, and discreetly reached for a sword. Spartacus took a deep breath and then roared, before lunging towards Spartacus with his sword raised high in the air. However, Spartacus's roar alerted Lucius and he immediately held up his shield in defense, blocking Spartacus's attack. This appeared to annoy Spartacus, but angered Lucius, who pushed the shield at Spartacus, causing him to jump backwards. Grandpa Castro immediately ran into the commentary box, much to Rubius's annoyance, and all of Snow Square watched as Lucius continually blocked all of Spartacus's attacks with his shield. Lucius growled at Spartacus and told him that he could have been less of a coward, as this would have been more honorable, and that their uncle Janus had not been a coward, making Grandpa Castro nod in approval. The boys began circling each other, and Grandpa Castro announced that it was likely Spartacus would win this fight, as he was slightly more muscular than Lucius. Lucius then looked Spartacus in the eye and asked him if he really wanted to win by killing his own brother, which made Spartacus laugh, and he asked Lucius if he had really thought that they could win without killing each other. Lucius then stormed towards Spartacus with his shield at the ready, and Spartacus jumped backwards, before cackling in clear amusement at the sudden attack by Lucius. Lucius then announced that Janus would be so disappointed at Spartacus for being such a coward, but Spartacus retorted that Janus would be proud of him once he won these games. Spartacus raised his sword and thrust it at Lucius, although he blocked it with his shield, before throwing the shield at Spartacus. It hit Spartacus in the throat with so much force that he gagged and fell to the ground whilst regaining his breath. Spartacus desperately tried to grab his sword, but Lucius snarled and grabbed his spear from his belt, before thrusting it into Spartacus's chest. Spartacus coughed blood, and Grandpa Castro gasped in shock as Lucius apologized to Spartacus, and that he began to shake as he thrust his spear into Spartacus's throat. Spartacus continually coughed blood and snarled at Lucius before his cannon sounded seconds later, and Lucius groaned in unhappiness. Following Spartacus's cannon, Playwright spun around and let out a slight grin, whispering that the Castro brothers had turned on each other. Playwright then glared at Bella, who was still crying over Castal's body and shouting that she was sorry. Playwright then let out a tiny laugh and slowly got to his feet, before creeping up behind Bella. However, she still did not notice that Playwright was right behind her, and it was only when he said, "That's how it feels," when she spun around and shouted. Bella shouted unintelligibly at Playwright before asking through her tears if he had killed Castal. Playwright laughed in amusement and said, "Yes, indeed," before bowing. Playwright then glanced at Castal's body, before telling Bella that this was revenge for what she had done to Regal. Bella shook her head and told Playwright that she had just been trying to protect Castal, but that she was sorry for Regal's death. Bella roared at Playwright and lunged towards him with one of her knives, before stabbing it into his chest. Playwright laughed as Bella swore and asked him how he was still alive, but he said, "Body armor does wonderful things, my dear," before jumping to his feet and asking her if she really thought he would let his brother's murderer get away. Bella then retrieved her knife and aimed it for for Playwright's face. But as she prepared to stab him, he purposely dropped to his knees and escaped from under Bella's legs. Playwright crawled out from under Bella's legs before punching her in the back of the head, but she instead fell backwards onto him. Playwright swore in surprise and desperately tried to get out from under Bella, but after he did, she kicked him in the genitals, causing him to cry out in pain. He then laughed, however, and said, "Kill me, then." Bella asked him why she should do this, and Playwright replied that even if she killed him, she would not be able to resurrect Castal, making him laugh even louder. Bella snarled and punched Playwright in the nose, and he staggered backwards, before Bella grabbed him by the scruff of his neck and shouted in his face that she would make his death as painful as possible, which made Playwright laugh even louder. Bella then stabbed him in the groin, and he laughed in amusement before she pushed him to the ground. Bella then smashed Playwright's head into the ground as hard as she could, leaving several dents in his skull as he laughed despite the pain. As the life slowly left Playwright's body, Bella snarled and called him a bastard, before muttering, "Say hello to your brother, cabron," and smashing his head once more. Playwright's cannon sounded and Bella whimpered at the blood spreading all over her hands, but she grabbed her knife and stared ahead. An announcement then went on as game maker Griffin announced that Lucius Castro and Bella Velasquez were the final two tributes of the 105th Hunger Games, and Lucius muttered the 14 under his breath. Bella then slowly nodded and held Castell's body, but as for Lucius, sand suddenly began falling from the ceiling, making him shout. Sand also began falling from the room Bella was hiding in, and she cried out in Spanish before running towards the central room. They both waded to the central room in a few minutes and Bella hid behind the statue before grabbing one of the fire torches as she waited for Lucius to arrive. Lucius arrived soon after with the goggles over his eyes, which had helped him navigate through the corridors and into the main room. As soon as Lucius entered the room, he walked towards the statue, asking Bella where she was, and she took a deep breath before throwing the torch in his direction. He swore in a panic and left back, shouting in fear. Bella then leapt out from behind the statue and snarled at Lucius, who sneered back at her. Lucius asked her if she had killed Castell, making her cry louder as she told him that it was Playwright who had killed Castell, making Lucius shake his head. As Lucius got ready for this final battle, Bella threw one of her knives at him, but he quickly pulled up his shield in defense, causing the knife to bounce off the strong metal. Bella shouted in panic and asked Lucius where he had gotten this shield, but Lucius simply grinned and told her not to distract him, as if he did not win, it would make killing his brother rather pointless. Bella gasped and asked Lucius why he had killed Spartacus, but Lucius shouted back that Spartacus had been trying to kill him and he had only defended himself. Bella then threw another knife at Lucius, but he quickly blocked it with his shield and charged at Bella. He then retrieved his spear and jabbed it at Bella's neck, but she blocked his spear with her knife and pushed it away. Lucius grinned as Bella repeatedly dodged his attacks before she threw her remaining two knives at Lucius, with one hitting him in the leg and the other flying past him. Lucius yelped in pain as he bent over to examine the wound in his leg and did not notice Bella running towards him. She leapt through the air and slammed her foot against his back, making him fall to the ground. However, he managed to get to his feet and he retrieved the knife from his leg before throwing it at Bella's head, which caused her to collapse to the ground. Bella screamed in pain but then appeared to accept what was going to happen and whispered that she would be reunited with Castell in some place called Heaven, which appeared to confuse Lucius. He then grabbed his spear and thrust it into Bella's heart, which sounded her cannon seconds later. Lucius then took a deep breath before he dropped to his knees and cheered out in glee as game maker Griffin announced that Lucius Castro was the winner of the 6th Quinquennial Quell, and it was noticed that Griffin blushed when she said this. It had originally been predicted that District 14 might be able to pull off a win in their first year of the games, due to Bella's determination to protect Castell, and so the interview runway had been designed in order to reflect District 14. However, Capital designers immediately got to work after Lucius was lifted to safety, in order to design a runway to reflect District 2. The crowd soon arrived, and Lucius made his way down the runway in a golden full-sleeved knee-length tunic, which was showing off his solid arms. The audience cheered on Lucius as he made his way past them, and he received the flowers they threw at him. He glanced at the many statues in the front of the stage, placing his hands on the one portraying his uncle, and Janus greatly resembled his nephew, as they had the same curly black hair and grey eyes, as well as the olive skin. The interview soon began, but before it did, Lucius complimented Priscilla, who was dressed in a Roman outfit to resemble the one that had been worn by the goddess in the statue in the central room of the arena. Priscilla blushed and Lucius grinned at her, before staring at the statue of Ennius Stolten. Lucius finally made his way to the stage to applause from the crowd, and he bowed and gently sat down next to Priscilla, further complimenting her short pink hair and her green eyes. After jokingly fanning herself, Priscilla complimented Lucius's good looks, before nodding at the cameras and beginning the interviews. Lucius was commended by Priscilla for how he had fought during the games, stating he would have made his uncle Janus proud. Grandpa Castro grinned at Lucius from the audience and nodded, making Lucius grin. Priscilla asked Lucius how he felt about killing Spartacus, and Lucius replied that Spartacus was his twin brother and that they had done a lot together, and so it had been extremely hard to kill his brother, but that Spartacus had been trying to kill him and that Spartacus's death had been self-defense. After many questions about how he felt about his victory, Priscilla asked Lucius about what he thought about Bella, and he replied that she must have been extremely emotionally strong to be able to kill a career tribute despite having lost her brother less than an hour prior. As Lucius left the stage, however, a recording was shown on the stage, and the audience gasped as it showed Lucius and game maker Griffin becoming intimate on a bed. Lucius winced in embarrassment as Priscilla gasped and Grandpa Castro buried his head in his hands. Game Maker Griffin could be seen blushing in embarrassment as well, making her interview rather awkward. Lucius returned to District 2 the next week and was hailed as a hero by his mentors, Icarus, his father, his grandfather, his younger brothers, as well as most of the Dalton elite. Lucius was asked to take up a position at the Dalton elite to teach students about how they had to make certain sacrifices in order to win the game, such as Lucius having to kill Spartacus, but he politely declined, stating that he needed a break. Also, it is known that a 19-year-old Lucius got married to a 20-year-old Griffin the next year, and that loads of capital citizens made their way to the wedding of a capital favorite victor and the head game maker. Lucius and Stella went on to have a son, Julianus, who was born just before the 119th games, and he went on to volunteer for District 2 during the 135th games at the end of 16, going on to win a quinquennial Quell, just like his father. Okay, so this is my announcement. Before I begin, I would like to apologize if I pronounce Spanish names wrong in Spanish words. I'm learning Spanish on Duolingo and at school, but I haven't mastered the pronunciation yet. So here's my announcement. As some of you may know, I have been trying to reach the 158 games, and that's my goal. So I will be continuing Hunger Games Chronicles, but the games will be slightly shorter, much shorter. There will be posted in collections such as 106 to 110, 111 to 115, 116 to 120, 121 to 125, 126 to 130, 131 to 135, 136 to 140, 141 to 143, 144 to 146, and 147 to 149, and 150. They will be posted monthly, and I'm really sorry that they'll be posted monthly, but I've been trying. This was the best I could make it since I'm dealing with a lot right now. And anyways, as part of an agreement me and my family made, they will be posted monthly, but 150 will be really good. Thank you for supporting my channel, and I really appreciate you guys watching. Thank you, and also you should check out the Hunger Games Discord, as well as the Tales of the Hunger Games Discord. I think that's all from me, Dustin Al-Fayed, and see you next month. Videos posted every 15. Bye!